my intellect is very limited compared to the vastness of the universe. So I think if we tap into what is inside of us, which is, it's kind of hard to conceptualize, but I think what is really inside of us, what's inside of me is inside of you, is inside of everybody. It's that same consciousness or intelligence. And we all have access to it, and we're all connected to it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Transformation Journey. My name is Emiliano, and in this episode I am presenting to you a conversation I had with Elizabeth M Lykins. Elizabeth is a transformational coach. She is the CEO and publisher of Magnificent Metamorphosis magazine and is also the author of Reflections on Transcendence, a book whose subtitle is Everything You Have Been Searching For Is Already Inside You. And I would say this is an important part of today's conversation. Other things you will listen to Alyssa and I talk about are consciousness, book recommendations, how we all get inspired by fictional and non-fictional transformation stories, and much more. So let's get into my conversation of today with the great Elizabeth M Lykins. Right, so Melissa, you're an author, a publisher, you're a transformational coach, and a medical provider. And so I would like to know, how come are you a transformational coach?
Well, the type of coaching that I do, there's all different kinds of coaching, life coaching, different styles. But basically, the style that I learned is how to transform people's lives. That's the focus, not just helping people lose weight or quit smoking, or, there's a lot of types of coaching.
Mm-hmm. And what is your job as a transformational coach? I am asking this because my podcast is focused on transformation, so I would like to get deeper into that.
So basically, I coach people that are looking for a change in their life, and I just facilitate turning them back to their own inner voice so that they can transform their own life. I just point the way. And there's skills involved in doing that, but I basically help to draw out of them what they need to do for themselves.
Yeah, great. And well, also you're the author of Reflections on Transcendence, and so I think that is a way in which you help people transform too, right?
Yes, and actually that's the way that I wanted to basically have a bigger impact, because when you coach, you're just one-on-one with somebody, or maybe in a small group, but not everyone has the money to be able to afford coaching one-on-one. So this is a way that people can make a change in their life regardless of, if they have very little money, they'll still be able to do it.
Yeah.
As long as they can buy a book or even get the ebook, which is really inexpensive.
Yeah, true. And well, I would like to talk more about the book. So what is your book about, so that my audience can get to know more about you and, well, about the concepts in it?
Well, the book is really about, it's a number of quotes by famous people and my reflections on them. So it's somewhat diary-like in that way. There's a number of chapters, but the very beginning of each chapter is just a very short bit of text about a theme that will help the person to transform. So the whole idea of this is not to be an intellectual book, but to be more of a getting a person out of their head and into a more reflective space. And that's why I use the art as well, because when you're staring at art, you're usually not thinking of words. You're feeling. And so the whole idea is to read a little tiny nugget of wisdom and reflect on it. And then get the person out of their head and the hamster wheel that we all have going on in our brain about, oh, I need to do this, and what if this, and what if that?
Yeah.
This is to help us to get out of that and into a more introspective place where you can think about solutions for your own life instead of looking to other people to help you.
Exactly. And well, actually, I think you did a great job there. And you also mentioned in the book, I think it's in the first chapter, 3 principles that explain the connection between the spiritual self and the physical self, right? And so I would like you to explain these 3 principles.
Well, that idea, that concept has been around for a long time, but the way that it was articulated in that particular way was by Sydney Banks. He's a Scottish born, but lived in Vancouver in Canada. And he just describes a way that we operate from the inside out using mind, consciousness, and thought. So the mind, the universal mind, is intelligence, the divine wisdom of the universe, or whatever words we want to use. Consciousness is just our awareness that there is something bigger than ourselves. And thought really is our way of interpreting what our world is like. And the problem with that, it can be good and bad, is because our body physiologically will respond with feelings to what our thoughts are.
Yeah.
And so that can be great, and that can be a really big problem. And so trying to maneuver through life with just thought, we'll really get in trouble. But if we take those thoughts and the feelings that they produce, and sometimes we're not aware of the thoughts, but we can feel the feeling, which leads us back to the thought. Then we can kind of make sense of that and try to get back into, tap into the wisdom of the universal mind. Or sometimes it's in other disciplines besides Sydney Banks, it's called consciousness. So it's talking about the same thing, which is universal wisdom that we all, any living thing possesses. That's what gives us life. When that's gone, we're just matter. We start to decay. But that which makes us who we are is this inner wisdom, divine consciousness that is a part of every living thing. And we all have access to that.
Yeah, and I actually like that you mention, well, every living thing, because I would like to know your thoughts on what makes us different from other animals. So is it consciousness, or just, well, that we have consciousness, or our level of consciousness, or what are your thoughts there?
I think even the smallest of insects, or even an amoeba, has some sort of consciousness. I think it's just the way that the universe is experiencing itself in different ways. I mean, we look at even our physical world, there's all sorts of different kinds of creations. And I think that is just a way that maybe the universe is playing and experiencing physical vitality. And so you can have a very different experience of life if you're an insect versus being a human being, or some other kind of an animal. But I think we all have consciousness, which is this divine intelligence that gives us life, animates whatever body we're in.
And what are some habits or activities that can help us develop this consciousness? Just reflection, or what are things?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that people can reflect, but I think being in nature is a very easy way for people to connect. It gets you out of the more sophisticated type of life that we have, gets us away from our phones, from computers, from traffic noise. Personally, for me, I think the beach, I think the rhythmic sounds of the waves, the wind blowing, and you look at how vast that is, that gives me, for me personally, a tiny little sense of our place in the universe and how big it really is and how we're just a part of that.
Yeah, and that's actually a transformative experience, right?
It is for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it. And well, now turning back again into thought. So, in the book, you mentioned that happiness comes from within, because I what I got, or what I reflected, was that it comes from within because we create our thoughts, right? And we can be conscious of which thoughts we are having. And so, if we have the right thoughts, then we will perceive life in the right way, or in a happy way. So, is it that way, or what's your perception there?
My perception is that our brain, our human brain, not the larger mind, which is a spiritual thing, but our human brain is very much like a computer. And so what experiences we have It stores that data, and when something triggers the need to remember something, it activates that. And so, in essence, we can't really control our thoughts because they just pop up. But what we can do is control the amount of attention that we give to them. So if a thought pops in your head and you give it a lot of attention and you think about what does this mean, what's the significance of that, then all of a sudden you're going down this dark hole about that thought. Or another fine example, I think, is if someone cuts you off in traffic, which, that happens all the time where I live. And so if you let that fester in your mind and give that a lot of attention, then you start having really negative feelings and thoughts about what may have about happened but didn't happen, like they almost cut you off but they didn't, and you survived and nothing happened. And so if you just let that thought go right through you and just pass through your consciousness briefly, and then immediately you'll notice some other thought comes up, like what's for dinner, or tomorrow I have to take my kid to whatever. And so the brain is always very active. And so if you give attention to thoughts that are not very helpful, it can take you down a really dark path. But if you just let it go through you like the wind, then something else will pop up that's probably a little more helpful. And then if another negative thought pops up, just let that one go. Yeah, and just give attention to the good ones.
Exactly. And actually, I want to know, are you familiar with the concept, the idea of the secret?
In what context?
Yes, and there's this book, The Secret, which says that what you think, you start to manifest into the world. So
yes.
I would like to know, is that how you perceive it, and how it works, or what are your thoughts there?
I do agree with that, because I think what you think, you feel, and then you act. And so what you think, you become. And you also attract things that you're thinking and feeling. So I know if I'm in a low mood, I attract stuff that is more negative. If I'm not in a low mood and I'm more in a happy mood or a peaceful place, I attract people that are similar. And so I think there is quite a bit of something to that, where you are manifesting or putting out to the universe the kinds of things that you're attracting, and that you're attracted to also. I think when you're in a dark place, you are attracted to dark people because that's what you know. When you are in a good place, or in a introspective place, or a more spiritual place, you'll find people that think similarly. And I found that to be true in my life, and I believe that to be true.
Yeah, and actually, I relate one thing you said in the book with this. So in the book, and I actually want to read the quote. So you say, each of us innately possesses a force within that is far greater than our human force alone. This force is the true nature of who we really are. So do you think that is sort of the secret we are talking about?
I do. And I think, I know I've come up with things in my life to do or say that really didn't come from my brain, because my brain couldn't wrap around those ideas. It came from somewhere inside of me that I didn't really think about. It just popped up. And when I listen to that, then my life is more stable. When I try to think of things myself, my intellect is very limited compared to the vastness of the universe. So I think if we tap into what is inside of us, which is, it's kind of hard to conceptualize, but I think what is really inside of us, what's inside of me is inside of you, is inside of everybody. It's that same consciousness or intelligence. And we all have access to it, and we're all connected to it. And so it's really hard for the human brain to kind of conceptualize, but we have that ability to tap into that at any time when we listen.
And I actually think that when you are conscious of this thing, this force that connects us all, you start to be more how do you call it, maybe more kind with people, right? And
Yes.
with
And
your
I think,
environment and animals. Yeah. Hmm.
yes. And I think the way that I think it's really easy for me to conceptualize this now that we've had Star Wars, I think
Hmm.
the idea of the Force is brilliant. Is this is something bigger than us, but that we all have, and not just if you're Skywalker family.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we all have that, and I think that movie series has helped people to tap into that in a way that you wouldn't really expect when you're going to a movie theater to get entertained, really.
Mhm. Actually, in your book, you also mentioned these, well, some things you can do to connect more with this force and also connect more with other people, right? But I would like you to mention some of these activities. I think you say things like breathing and then just being kind. So, what are some of these things we can do to be better with people?
Well, I think the first thing and most important thing, and I know I can always be better at this, is when you're speaking to someone. Most of us, when we're talking to someone, we're trying to think of what to say next
Hmm.
instead of listening. And I think if we really listen to people, and all of us can be better at that, myself particularly, if we really listen, we will see beyond what they're saying and we will hear what is coming from within them, that they have fears and concerns and um, basically a depth about them and a reason that they do certain things that might not be something that we like, but there's always a story behind that. And I think if we listen for the deeper story, then our relationships will be better. Even with people that disagree with us, we can
Hmm.
understand where they're coming from and not hear their words, but see them as a spiritual being that's connected
Hmm.
to us. And I think if we keep that in our mind, primarily, things get easier to deal with, especially difficult people. We can have compassion for them, which we otherwise wouldn't if we're just using our own human brain. We're usually repulsed by people that aren't very pleasant. But if we
Hmm.
go deeper, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because one thing I notice with myself, even if in these interviews, is that many times I find myself just thinking, what will I say next, or what will I ask, and not just listening. But I think listening could even bring me more better questions.
It does for me. And I know that, I came from a background where you had to, memorize what you're going to say, or you had points
Hmm.
that you had to cover, but really things evolve in a more natural way if you just listen within you to what needs to be said next. And it can go in a completely different direction than what you had planned, and usually a better one.
Hmm. Yeah, and also again, now I am remembering that you say in the book that as young kids, we are more connected with other people and we are more focused in the present moment, and that these are things that we start to lose as we start getting older, right? And so you also mention essence and nature. What is this essence and nature? Is it the force we were talking about?
Yes, I think those are just different words. It's really hard to place labels and words on things
Mm,
that are really concepts. And so sometimes we will use words that really don't adequately describe things, but using different words, they're symbols really, for a concept, then it's easier for some people to understand some words versus others. But I think when you watch little children, for example, they live completely in the present. I mean, even if they have a temper tantrum, it's over in a few minutes, and then they're
mhm,
happy and playing. Whereas as we get older and become adults in particular, we get somewhat fixated on a mood or on an idea, and we're not very present. I mean, I remember when my daughter was little, she would just look at a mud puddle, and that would be just fascinating to her, and she would stomp up and down it. And you forget as you're an adult the wonder of what is around us. And so if we can tap into that. It's still in there in our head. If we can just tap into that, it helps us to be more present, I think, at the world around us, what's going on right now, instead of thinking about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. You know, one thing I like to ask in my interviews to authors is, what lesson do you think is the biggest in your book, or what lesson would you hope that anybody gets? And I actually want just to mention one thing here. My biggest lesson from your book, and I want to know if that is sort of the thing you try to tell people, is that, well, we have these three principles. Well, yeah, we have this consciousness, thought, and the mind, right? And so by connecting with this and being present, we start to enjoy life more, to get to higher levels of consciousness and of the mind, and also to connect and interact better with our environment. So I think that was sort of my biggest takeaway, if it could be called like that. But I want to know, is that what you tried to tell to people, or what was it?
Yes, and I think even deeper than that is that it's really in the subtitle of the book. Everything that you're searching for
Mm-hmm.
is already inside of you. And so most of us, myself included, um, look outside of ourselves for something to help us to feel better, to be better, to tell us what to do. And really, if we can just put our brain on pause and listen within ourselves and not to others, then we will know what to do without, I mean, it's not to minimize that we need knowledge, but this inner voice within us will direct us for our unique circumstances at any moment, whenever we need it. And that's the even deeper message of the book, is trust your inner wisdom.
I love it. And how do you personally connect with this inner wisdom, like with these activities of going to the beach and to the nature?
I think what that helps me, certainly. Um, Being still. I think being really still, you can hear yourself and not other things. I think music helps me too. Certain types of music, of course, you want to dance or you do different things, but more quiet, calm music, I think, is really the language of the soul. It really creates feelings that don't have words attached to it or labels attached to it. And I think it can move people in ways that we really can't be touched in any other way. And I think that probably moves me the most. Nature certainly does, but we don't always have the luxury of being able to go out into nature. But music is on our phones and on our computers and everywhere. And so if there is some beautiful music, whatever is beautiful to you, music that moves you, I think even pausing just moments a day to listen to that really profoundly helps me.
Okay, I will try to do that. And also, I want to know, are you familiar with the philosophy of Stoicism?
Yes.
Yeah, and well, so I was going to say that Marcus Aurelius has his great diary, and there he talks about many things related to what we are talking about, or the things that you talk about in your book. And so I would like to know um, if there were any specific books you used as inspiration for your book.
Not any one in particular. I really looked to, and Marcus Aurelius is quoted in the book too. I mean,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
he lived long, long ago, and Roman Empire days, and the wisdom that I speak about has been around since recorded history, and even before that, I'm sure before people, knew how to document what their experiences were. That's the beauty of the universal divine wisdom, divine intelligence. It's always been. And
Mm-hmm.
so different people throughout history describe it in different ways. But that knowledge is not exclusive to any one person. It's been around since we've, it's mind-boggling. It's been around forever. I mean, we can't wrap our mind around forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been.
Yeah, I like it. And actually, I was having this conversation with Owen Samaran in which we were talking about how knowledge is compounded from things that have already been thought. And I think it has to do with this idea that, um, yeah, the lessons and the mind have always been there, but
Yeah.
we have just discovered them.
Yes.
Or,
And I
yeah.
think we can add things to a concept with our
Mm-hmm.
own unique version of, in our own, you know, patterns in our brain and knowledge that we have. We all have, even if we grew up in the same family, we have very different experiences that,
Yeah.
you know, and thoughts in our mind that we've stored away. So we can always add to that. But I think the basic concepts about things have been around a very, very, very long time.
Hey guys, so in today's episode I also want to share with you a book I recently got, which actually is today's sponsor. The book is called Getting Naked and it was written by Joel Primus with Bennett R. Coles. This book shares the hard-learned lessons and captivating story of the startup Naked Brand Group, founded by Joel. This company is a Nasdaq publicly traded company which raised over $17 million and sold its products in department stores all around the world. This book shares the stories Joel has to tell about entrepreneurship based on his journey. In the book, you will learn many lessons around all the stages of a company, such as getting started, raising money, building a team, and letting go of the company. I personally find pretty funny the title of this book, but I also find interesting the story and the wisdom behind it. I am also in my transformation journey of becoming an entrepreneur, and cool books such as this one are helping me a lot to get in the process and go in the right direction. If the book seems interesting to you or you think it would be interesting for a friend, you can find it on Amazon by typing Getting Naked book or by checking the link in the description of this episode. And now talking again about Stoicism. So I would like to know what is your approach to death, because there is this Stoic mantra of memento mori, um, but again, your book is about transcendence and reaching other states of consciousness, right? And I would like to know what is your approach to death, to your own and to others' death.
So my feeling is this spiritual self that animates us. And really my basic belief is that we are all spiritual beings
Mhm.
housed in a mortal body. And so when the mortal body can no longer sustain us, we return to the consciousness that we came from. And so it's really hard to wrap one's mind around that. But, I've lost some friends recently to death, and I feel that they're with me in a very literal sense and not just, floating in a cloud somewhere or, meeting up with other previously deceased people. I think that we return to that spiritual state that is in every single one of us. So therefore it returns to us. It's a really difficult concept, but that's what I think happens. It's been spoken about by many people. And so I think that is really what happens. I don't believe that there is a magical place of heaven or hell, and if you're bad, you're punished forever. And I don't
Yeah.
believe in that. I think life is much kinder than that.
Yeah. And so again, talking about Marcus Aurelius and about stillness. So in his book, well, this actually has to do a little bit more with obstacles, but in his book he says that there is no obstacle bigger than yourself and then your soul. And you also talk a little bit about that in your book, about the the beauty of adversity. And so I would like you to talk about that and why adversity has a beautiful side.
Well, we usually think that it's just the most horrible thing ever. But
Mm,
when we come across an obstacle, it is an opportunity to learn. And that's why we're here, really, is to learn. And if we only chose really happy things, it would be kind of a boring life, really,
yeah.
because, we would just be stuck with a very limited set of things. But usually in every horrible event that happens in our lives, and some people have more horrible things happen to them than others, there is always a lesson in it for us where we could not possibly have learned that lesson in any other way unless we experienced that trial or that challenge. And it's not something we seek out, but that is what the universe hands us.
Mm,
And while we can't choose what comes our way as a problem, we can choose how we see it. We do always have a choice about that.
yeah, we
And,
do.
I think one of the people that in history, recent history, that I really admired was Anne Frank. When you think of the horrible situation that she was in, and she's just a teenager, and remained very positive about her tormentors. And so, you do have a choice about how you see what is happening to you, to where it doesn't hurt your internal self. They may hurt your external self, but what is inside of you cannot be touched unless you allow it.
Yeah. And actually, now it comes to mind the quote. I think it is from either Robin Sharma or Colby Sharma, and it says something like a difficult day for your ego is a beautiful day for your soul, or something like that. And I think
Yeah.
actually adversity is helping us understand better even ourselves and our nature, right?
Yes, and I think if we don't have adversity, we really don't have much of an opportunity to understand what it feels like for people who have different circumstances than we do. When we go through challenging times, we can have more compassion for people who may not have the same kind of life that we do.
Mhm. It is also about transformation, right? About how you well, you transforming yourself, but transforming also how you see things.
Yes, um, I know through my own journey, I have changed quite a bit about how I see life. And if I had never had any problems or trials, I wouldn't have gotten that. I just wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah, and again, that's adversity is what makes a beautiful life in a certain way.
Yes, maybe not while you're in it. You don't always see
Yeah.
that. Yes, but when you get to the other side of it, you see, wow, that was hard, but I learned this, 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 and this. If nothing else, sometimes we learn what is really important in our lives is not material things or just the things of the trappings of life. What's really important are more spiritual things, and you really don't always get the opportunity to understand what those are unless your physical self is challenged in some way, whether
Mhm.
you have an illness or whether you have some financial difficulties or something that causes you to stop and take a little different course.
Mhm. Yeah, and this all has been about transformation in some way, and I would like to know what is your definition of transformation.
I think transformation is just changing perhaps what you think that you are, and perhaps seeing who you really are, and moving yourself into a more of a, I think of like a caterpillar who completely it metamorphoses into a completely different being from a little, worm-like structure to a butterfly. They
Yeah.
don't live long after that. their life is very brief after they become this beautiful butterfly, but they've completely changed. Everything about them has changed. And I think that is the biggest goal about transformation, is whether we live a long life or not, if we return to our inner self, no matter what happens to our physical self, we will be okay.
I love that. Yeah. And I actually didn't know this thing about the caterpillar. I didn't know that. Well, I did know that its life is brief, but not that it is briefer when it turns into a butterfly. But it comes to mind consciousness. So at least the caterpillar is conscious of its transformation because it knows how to fly now, and it is aware of its new abilities, right?
Yes. And I
Oh.
think maybe I know when I watch animals or insects, but animals in particular, I have two cats, which are like great Zen masters, really.
Mm.
When I watch them, they don't have all of the distractions that humans do. And so they're fascinated just by little things, um, and frightened by little things. I mean, they are living in the moment always. And if something's not bothering them, they're very calm and relaxed. And I think if I could be more cat-like,
Hmm.
life would be better because I would be living in the moment. And so I watch them, and it helps me to reflect on my own way of dealing with things. Is to
Hmm.
just take it as it comes. They're not worrying about what they did yesterday or what they're going to do tomorrow. They live right in the moment and take things as life unfolds. Now, sometimes they fight with each other, or my cats, and then the next few minutes they're grooming each other. So, you just take life as it comes, and your life is far more peaceful. If we
Hmm.
spend all of our time in our head, it's not very conducive to interacting with other people.
Hmm. And I guess many people think that if you live in the present, maybe you are not either reflecting about your past or preparing and planning for your future. So, do you think it is that way or not really? But it is just about being conscious of what you are doing, even if you are, planning your future or reflecting about your past.
I think there is a balance there. It's not to say that we don't need to think about what direction we might want to take in our life, because that determines, what type of education we start. We may
Hmm.
not end up doing that same thing, but we go down a pathway. And if we decide that, this really isn't for me, then when you're present, you don't invest 8 years of your life on a doctorate for something that you don't really like.
Sure.
You change your mind and you do something different. And then reflecting on the past, I mean, we all have some beautiful memories, and we all have some really not beautiful memories. And so memories are just that. The past really has no power over us any longer unless we let it. It's just a memory. Because if you assess your present situation and you're not in any danger like you may have been in the past, that part's over. It's just a memory, and we can have learned something from that, maybe to avoid in the future, or maybe to do differently in the future if the opportunity presents itself. But memories can be very good. Some memories we don't need to live over and over. And so, unlike conventional therapy, where you rehash all the finer details of all that may have transpired in your life, if you can see things as a learning experience in the past that has no power over you now, you can shift that immediately. You don't need,
Hmm.
5 years of therapy for that. Um, if you can see things for what they were, and then it happened, and whatever it was, even really traumatic things when you're small, uh, it wasn't your fault when you have no control over it. And so I think that can help people to shift horrible things that may have happened in someone's past and not let it continue to dominate their present.
And actually, I
And
think
again,
that
we come
is,
back to the present.
yeah, because I think it also applies to the short term, right? Because I mean, I find myself many times, worrying about how I did maybe in school or anything, or how I will do. But again, that will be the future, and that is the past. But that's not the present moment, and that's not my state. That's not how I am in that moment, right? It's just my mind, my brain, trying to think about that.
Yes, and I think we all are hard on ourselves, can be,
Hmm.
where mistakes teach us. And, we all make them. Some of us don't want to admit that we make them, and that can be a problem. But if we make a mistake, we just do better the next time. Now
Hmm.
that we know better. I mean, a lot of times the mistakes we make are because we really didn't know better at the time and we did the best that we knew then. When you know better, you can do better. So Maya Angelou statement.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you know better, you can do better.
Yeah, that's true, and actually, that is the beauty again of adversity, because you learn and you can do better.
So it is a beautiful thing, not when you're going through it, but on the other side of it, you can see the importance of having gone through that.
Mhm. Yeah, and actually, well, I have been loving your book, and I am currently reflecting about it in a diary that I have. But I would like to know if there is another book you're planning to launch in the future.
I haven't thought of it yet, but I wouldn't say that I won't because I really didn't even plan to write this one. It was a thought that came up and it wouldn't leave me. And so I learned to pay attention to those.
Hmm. Yeah, you learn to be conscious about them.
Yes, I think if a thought comes up more than once that's persistent about something that I need to do, when I listen, things work out well. When I don't listen, they don't.
Hmm. Yeah. And well, I have three more questions we have become usual in the podcast. So first of all, what would be your advice for your younger and your teen self?
Not to take things so seriously.
Hmm. I like it.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, I had a lot of fun when I was younger, but everything seemed so big and important and overwhelming, and like I had to do everything right. And I would tell my younger self to just relax and enjoy myself.
Nice. Okay. Cool. And well, then the second question that has become usual is what are some of your top book recommendations?
Oh my, there's so many. Uh, yeah. Wow. I think one of my favorite books, really, and it's very simple, is The Four Agreements. Um, it says a lot in a very short little book.
Hmm.
And, he has some sequels to that too. But um, in terms of spiritual books, I also love all sorts of books. It'd be difficult for me to say some
Yeah.
science fiction books I like. The Harry Potter series, I think, is great for kids in particular and adults because it really gets you in your imagination and to see things that are bigger than yourself, with the underlying theme being to be a better person.
Yeah.
So there's so many wonderful books. It's really hard to narrow down, and all the different genres, really.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and actually I think that is true about the science fiction and fiction in general, that you can learn many things from stories that maybe aren't intended to be focused on spirituality or personal development, right?
Right. And I think I'm attracted particularly to those sorts of most allegories, sort of
Mm-hmm.
books that often end up becoming movies because they lend
Mm-hmm.
themselves to that, or movie series. But
Yeah.
something that people go through trials, but they overcome at the end and become better as a human being. Those really, that's the kind of thing, whatever genre it is. Um, if that's the underlying theme, that's what I'm attracted to.
Mhm. And I think a great example is your experience with Star Wars and the Force.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
that was
love
great.
that series. I've watched it, I don't know how many times. My daughter likes it too. Uh, there's just that theme of something bigger than you is inside of you is very appealing to me, and obviously appealing to hundreds of millions of people throughout the world
Hmm.
too. So I think George Lucas tapped into something very important there.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually, now talking about fiction, great stories about overcoming and about transformation turn into, I mean, either best-selling books or very successful movies, right? For example, I love the Rocky series and
Yes,
the following movies of Creed, and they're all about the transformation of these two guys, Rocky and Adonis, and it's just inspiring.
yes, and really, I think that's what people pay money to see.
Yeah.
Is they want to see someone who is maybe down and out in some way, or has some major problem, overcome that. And I think that's the story of life. Really, is
Hmm.
we're here to try to figure things out and how to return to our inner wisdom to maneuver through this and have a better experience at life. And then when
Yeah.
it all ends, this mortality, we return to this divine consciousness that's in everybody. It's in everything. And
I
so
like it.
it's kind of mind boggling. Just like when you look at the Milky Way, the stars, it is so mind boggling to me. I can remember my dad used to take us out on the porch, and we kind of lived in a semi rural area when we were really little. And we would just lie on a deck in lawn chairs at night, and weren't many street lights, any street lights really. So you could see thousands of stars, which you can't see in a city. And it was mind boggling to think how many there were and how far away they were. But even as a young kid, it was a spiritual experience for me because I had a sense of wonder about that and my place in the world. And these were like my earliest memories, 5, 6 years old. But I still remember that.
I love that. And actually, I think that, these experiences and these stories empower people to overcome their personal problems and the adversity they are facing. And actually, now that you mentioned stars, since the pandemic began, I started to watch the stars in the morning. I mean, here it is very polluted, but the ones that I can see make me, just reflect and make me be amazed of life, and again, be conscious of this existence. And I think that is a pretty nice thing.
Yes, and I think that no matter where we are in the world, there is something about nature
Hmm.
that moves us to remember who we really are. So, you may be in a polluted area, but you can see some stars, and that's much bigger than whatever circumstances you may be in, to remind you of who you are, really, who you really
Yeah.
are.
Exactly. I love that. And well, now lastly, I would like to know what is something you have recently learned or discovered that you could share to us.
Wow, that's interesting. Um, I've recently discovered, I think, that I really don't know everything. And I think when you're young, you think you know everything, and then you go through a phase in life where you think, maybe I don't know everything, so I have to go to school. And I'm I'm really learning that no matter how much I have learned in terms of knowledge, there's so much more that I can learn. And I think with the pandemic and all that is going on with that and all of the mind-boggling sort of trauma that people have gone through, I think what I'm come to understand is that we can get through anything if we listen to our inner voice, no matter what horrible circumstances we're in. Even if it seems insurmountable, we can still get through it if we stay focused and remain present. And that is not always easy to do, especially when you're going through some significant hardships. But when you return to that, everything will be all right within you. Might not be your physical circumstances might not be okay, but you as a spiritual being will be okay. And I think really writing this book and all that has gone along with that has taught me that more than I could have even imagined.
So now I am curious, would you suggest to anyone to write their own book, to go through this experience and this process?
Yes, I would. And whether you publish it with a conventional publisher or you just share it with a handful of people, I think your own personal story is very important. Even if you're just writing a diary, it's very important. It's important for you as the writer, and it will be important to people who pick it up and read it years later, maybe even after you're gone.
True.
That's the love of history that we have. We're reading about stories of people that are long gone, but we still find it fascinating to understand what they went through, even though our circumstances are very different now.
Mm-hmm. Even Marcus Aurelius is a great example.
Yes, very. Thousands of years ago.
Yeah,
a couple thousand years ago, and still a very interesting writing, even though his physical circumstances were very different. I mean, if you think about the times then, they were very, basic in terms of, we have smartphones and television and all these, advances in technology, which none of that was there. I mean, they had aqueducts,
yeah,
which was amazing at the time, but still, they didn't have the distractions that we have. I think the more knowledge you have, the easier it is to get distracted from what's important.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing that I want to know, because it sometimes makes me be confused. What's your definition of spirituality?
So for me, spirituality is just tapping into your inner voice, your inner self, because again, what makes us alive is not this body that we're in. It is what animates that body or what moves that body. I mean, I've worked in medicine for years, and so I've seen a lot of people die. And when the person is dead, when they have died, you can sense the absence of that life inside of them. I mean, you can feel that it is not there. And that is the essence of spirituality, I guess. What makes that spirit inhabit this body and what makes it leave when it does.
Yeah, and that is true with yeah, and that is true with science too, because for example, I think of evolution. So there was this mind, this force before the body was here, right? And even with physics and things that don't have consciousness, there's a force that is moving them and that is making things happen.
Yes.
I like that.
And it's way beyond our intellect's ability to understand. I mean, we learn more and more as time goes by, but there's still this mystery about it that we don't know. Our brain just cannot, our human brain cannot comprehend that.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I wonder. So many religions, focus on humanity and maybe not in other species or other things. But with this other approach, with spirituality, well, I mean, this is a different topic. But do you think that aliens could exist based on this idea of the mind and the force?
Yes, I think it would be very arrogant of us to think that only the earth has life. Uh, Perhaps it's just far enough away from us physically that we can't interfere in it. But, it would not make sense for the vastness of this universe, for the only place where there is life forms to be here on Earth. It just doesn't seem to make sense, does it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Yeah. And well, really, I have loved this conversation, and I thank you for accepting my invitation and for your enthusiasm to work with us at the Reader Lounge. And well, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I appreciate your interview and all your assistance with having the book become more known. And I appreciate your time very much.
Thanks. And well, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at M Lykins Reflections. I'm on Facebook, and my website is www.amagnificentmetamorphosis.com. That's where I am on the website.